Hello everyone, my name is Russell and this is the Fallout from Dishonor podcast. It is Tuesday, July 27th at about 3 in the morning, a little before that. Obviously we're recording this a little bit later than I like to. I try to get these dropped every Monday, because I do Ring of Honor reviews for Ring of Honor TV, and I like to give, obviously, anyone who might listen to this a chance to actually watch the show before I review it and let everyone know my thoughts. Maybe you don't watch Ring of Honor, but you want to keep up to date, and that might be what you watch or listen to this. That's fine too, but anyone that might want to watch it first, I want to give them a chance to watch it before I spoil everything for them. So, with all that said, first and foremost, before we get into Ring of Honor and any of that, we have to talk about the things that the entire wrestling world has been ablaze with: news sites, podcasts, Twitter feeds, everywhere. And that is the two supposed major signings to AEW. I'm sure unless you're a wrestling fan and you've been living under a rock for the past week, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, before I get into this, I do want to kind of retract a statement from last week. I may have stated that Daniel Bryan was released on July 22nd. Obviously, that wasn't the case. According to the information I looked up online, Bryan's deal ended on July 30th. So I just wanted to correct myself. Is what it is. Made a mistake. Now, on top of that, clearly, I put my fucking foot in my mouth last week. I gave my thoughts on where I thought Bryan might end up or could end up, and obviously, somewhat biasly, I picked Ring of Honor for a couple different reasons. One of the biggest being, of course, he's already worked there for an extended period of time. People associated him with that company, and it just made sense to me at the time. It would be like a homecoming for him. That's not necessarily to say that he'll never step foot in a Ring of Honor ring if the news that's been reported is actually true. On July 21st, it was originally reported by Cassidy Haynes on Bodyslam.net that Bryan Danielson has inked a deal with AEW. It was also reported by Mike Johnson at PW Insider that on July 20th, the WWE has no future plans at all involving merch and Danielson for the remainder of the year. Supposedly, the same source Haynes spoke with has also said that there are tentative plans in place for Danielson's debut in AEW. So, of the two people we're going to talk about, this is the one that I definitely think is much more likely. Danielson has expressed an interest in wrestling with the wrestling on the indies, going over to New Japan, having a fairly free schedule, probably a very full schedule, but a fairly free schedule to kind of wrestle on the indies like they used to back in the day. I know I'm sure there's a bunch of people he wants to work with in the U.S. on the Indies and over in Japan. Earlier in the year, I forget if it was either right before or right after his deal with WWE expired. It was reported, I forget where it originated, but Nick Khan from WWE was supposedly in talks with New Japan about working with them on something. I think later it was basically assumed that it had to do with Bryan and his contract and possibly being able to go over and work some dates in New Japan. Since his contract has lapsed and there's basically been no sign that he's going back to WWE at all, we haven't heard anything about WWE and New Japan, so it's safe to assume it had to do with Bryan. Now, I have seen a lot of people online ask for whatever reason about the possibility of him using the Daniel Bryan name in AEW. I just wanted to clarify in case you're not clear on it. WWE owns the rights to that name. That is not possible. If he ends up showing up in AEW, it's going to be most likely under the Bryan Danielson name, which that is what it is. So, again, of the two possibilities, this is the one I think is the most likely. Moving on to the second name that has broke the fucking internet, it seems like. CM Punk. So, supposedly, hell has frozen over. Fightful broke the news last week that apparently CM Punk is talking, I want to stress, talking with AEW about a possible return. Keep in mind that this has supposedly happened before. Albeit, according to Punk, it was done by text and third parties. But this has been discussed before about the possibility of Punk coming into AEW. Obviously, the way I'm speaking about this, I'm a little skeptical of this name in particular. Along to go out with all of this news, last Thursday, Punk put up an Instagram post of a clip of a song, Osiris, by the Alan Parsons Project. Apparently, it was used by the Chicago Bulls during the Michael Jordan era. So people are putting two and two together and kind of relating the two. I grew up in the Michael Jordan era of basketball, but I didn't watch it a whole lot, so I can't really comment too much on that. It also kind of sounds like I'm being a negative Nancy. Don't get me wrong, I'd love a CM Punk return. But when it comes to Punk, again, like I talked about earlier, we've just been here before. Both the news about Punk and Danielson seem to be coming from credible sources. Everything I've talked about so far, anyway. So there very well could be smoke to both of these fires. But particularly with Punk, if it ends up being true, that's great. And both debuts are probably going to blow up whatever arena each one happens in. But at the end of the day with Punk, the only thing I'm truly aware of is that he's been in talks with it. And if that is actually accurate, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Talks are just talks. Now, I have been reading from some places. I'm not going to mention any websites, but I have yet to see this report by anyone that's super credible. When I talk super credible, I'm talking about Fightful, The Torch, PW Insider, or Dave Meltzer, that sort of thing. But there's been a lot of news since this talking has been talked about, for lack of a better term, that he is supposedly 100% signed at this point. Again, I don't want to call anyone out. I don't want to talk about the site specifically that I had read this out, because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. But again, it's been picked up by a lot of dirt sheets, but when it comes to the most credible ones, at the time of recording this, as far as I'm aware anyway, no one like Dave Meltzer or anyone like that has picked it up and said that it's 100% true. Of course, everyone is wrong once in a while, but I kind of find it interesting that none of these big major websites that have a lot of credibility with them have picked this up yet, though. So we'll see where this goes. Punk hasn't responded in any way on social media or interviews. He hasn't done a podcast or anything. Interestingly enough, apparently through Twitter, he did start following AEW, Tony Khan, Vince McMahon, and has unblocked and followed WWE. I kind of find that hilarious. To me, that stuff doesn't mean anything. It doesn't necessarily mean an AEW debut is imminent. It doesn't mean that he's going to be coming to WWE soon. Punk has trolled these sort of things before, so take it with a grain of salt as far as that goes. Now, in light of all this Punk news, I don't typically order AEW pay-per-views, but the next one, All In, is going to be in Chicago. And because of all these Punk rumors, I feel obligated to order this pay-per-view and see what's going to happen. Again, I'm not necessarily convinced that all this is true, but Punk is one of my favorite wrestlers of the past 15 years or so. If for some reason this all ends up being fact, obviously if it's 100% announced by AEW or Punk or Tony Khan that he's going to be there, I'm ordering the pay-per-view regardless. But I'm going to do it on a whim. If it's not 100% sure, I'm still going to do it. I feel obligated to, and I'd kick myself later if for some reason it ends up happening and then I gotta watch the debut on a YouTube clip. I would like to see it and just shit myself, basically. So, a couple other interesting things. Little less major news. Per a report by Dave Meltzer, WWE is interested in bringing back Braun Strowman. Now, it's been speculated this was going to happen regardless. He was released on June 2nd, and ever since then, a lot of people have speculated that maybe he was just released to then, a few months later, negotiate and have him have little less pay. Supposedly, from the things I've read online, he had about $1 million deal a year, maybe a little bit more. I find this one particularly interesting. I'm going to call WWE out here. So the Samoa Joe stuff, And the rumors that went around the WWE may have wanted Aleister Black, Malachi Black, if you're watching AEW, supposedly they wanted him back. This just proves what a giant shit show all the releases that we have been hearing about for the last few months. This has proved to me that I believe Nick Khan is the one that's making all these cut decisions, it seems like. And this is a publicly traded company in every sense of the word. It sounds like one hand definitely does not know what the other one is doing. So, congrats, WWE. You are, in fact, a truly publicly traded company, because one department doesn't know what the rest of the fucking company seems to be doing or wants. Now, moving on to more potential returns. The Rock. Per Andrew Zarian, I believe hopefully I'm not butchering that name, of the Mat Men podcast, The Rock supposedly has a return date with WWE. I haven't seen anything about when that might actually be as far as his real return date. Supposedly, he's expected to appear at Survivor Series. That wouldn't necessarily mean that he would debut at Survivor Series. Maybe he has a match and he debuts on SmackDown weeks before that. I would imagine it would be SmackDown. SmackDown's kind of their flagship show, although maybe USA flips a bitch about it, like they've done about a few things recently, and The Rock ends up appearing on both shows. Maybe not every week. We did see when John Cena came back at the Money in the Bank that he was on the following Raw and then on the following SmackDown. So I could see them doing something like that with The Rock too. Of the 4 potential returns that I've just talked about, this one has the least amount to speak on. This is also something we've heard before about The Rock. Same thing with CM Punk, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true. There was a WrestleMania that The Rock was supposedly in talks with WWE about returning. They even shot some angle type stuff with Triple H months and months before with The Rock, and it seemed like it was leading up to something. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly which WrestleMania that was, but obviously that didn't end up happening. So again, we'll see what we get with this. So, moving on from wrestling news, I'm going to do a new segment on the podcast. This is a working title, but we're going to be calling it Retro Wrestling Recap. Excuse me. Jesus. Where I'll watch one retro episode of course, wrestling. It could be anything. WWF, WWE, yes, there's a difference in my mind. What I grew up watching, WCW, ECW, Ring of Honor, anything. I may even throw AEW and New Japan. I know I've thrown the word retro in there, and it needs to be, a certain amount of years old. I may end up changing the name of this, but for now it's going to be called the Retro Wrestling Recap. Also, if you wanted to shoot me something that you think I should watch and review on the show, go ahead and feel free to email me, falloutfromdishonor@yahoo.com. So, as far as this goes, my first pick for this is AWA Championship Wrestling from March 4th, 1986. I recently finally decided to, I guess, get a Peacock subscription, you could say. I did, after the network lapsed, I did do their 1 week trial. I wasn't super impressed with the service. Just, it kind of seemed like a little bit of shit show. I didn't like the way it was laid out. Blah, blah, blah. Funny that I didn't actually set it up because we actually have Xfinity Comcast here. So we get Peacock for free, and I didn't bother to set up the free account until, I believe, the day of Money in the Bank. So that shows you how impressed I've been with the Peacock service. Along with the way that they've handled pay-per-views, the lack of retro content on Peacock is absolutely unjustifiable. Peacock, get your shit together. I know between this podcast and the last one, I've given them a lot of shit. If they don't get their shit together, I'm going to continue to do that. So, again, feel free to email me with any suggestions you might have. So, before I get into all this, about this episode, WWE apparently at one point had something about, or called Throwback Thursday on their website. I did a search about this episode after I watched it, and you'll figure out why. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and read my review first, and then I'll tell you what information I pulled off the WWE.com. So, AWA Championship Wrestling aired on ESPN. The original air date was March 4th, 1986. Location was the Showboat Sports Pavilion, I believe, Las Vegas, Nevada. So, the card. First match was Budokan versus Shawn Michaels. Important note about this was Shawn Michaels' AWA debut. Crowd, definitely not a fan of HBK, but that may have been based off of who he was facing, as where Khan was kind of a fan favorite at the time. Not a ton to get into in this match. It was a fairly basic match. HBK used the signature move, Sweet Chin Music. Here it was called the super kick. If you would know that if you're an older fan like I am. I'd actually kind of like to know when he started using this. I wouldn't imagine that it was in this match. Again, short match, pretty uneventful. HBK wins 6 minutes, 31 seconds with a splash off the top rope. Obviously, he wasn't using the super kick as a finisher at this time. So, next match on the card, Tim Patterson and Bun Boy Barton versus the Long Riders, which is Wild Bill Irwin and Scott Hogg Irwin. The crowd gave a decent response to the Irwins and booed the hell out of Patterson and Barton. God damn it. Sorry. I clicked something on my computer and my notes. Anyway. Important note about this. Announcers actually plugged an AEW World Title match for the following week during this match. David Sammartino versus Stan Hansen. Obviously mentioned that Hansen was the one that broke David's father's neck, which, if you know anything about wrestling history, his father, Bruno Sammartino, kind of a big deal. Now, get back to that a little later. This match, my opinion, not great. Not great at all. There was a point in this match where Bill Irwin seemed to distract the referee for basically no reason. It was really odd. I believe they were supposed to be the baby faces. It distracted the referee, and I believe, if I remember right, his partner Scott was getting the shit kicked out of him. Now, I bring that up because it seemed like a spot that typically you would, how can I explain this? It seemed like a spot that you would typically have the, it seemed like it was laid out. Sorry, I'm having a hard time describing this. It seemed like a spot where you would have a heel tag team, and one of the heel team members would distract the referee so that they could get a choke out or something on the opponent while the referee was distracted. But again, he was distracting the referee while his partner was getting the shit kicked out of him. I know that's definitely a babyface spot too, where the babyface comes in, the referee gets distracted, and the heels double team him. You need to watch the match to really understand what I'm getting at. Long Riders got the pin in this one after 8 minutes and 5 seconds with a clothesline. After the match, interviews. So through all of these, there were interviews after each match, which I thought was really cool. Also, as a little jab here, funny story, all the interviewers actually held their mics when they were interviewing the referees. Tony Schiavone can't usually seem to accomplish this in AEW. I don't know what the hell the deal with that is, but whatever. If you actually want to see a real interview in between the matches where the interviewer actually gets to hold on to the damn microphone, maybe give this AWA show a shot. In the interview, the Irwins were taking digs at the tag champs, which at the time were Scott Hall and Curt Hennig. Obviously, to me, this seemed like it was going to be building up to a future tag team championship match. Hopefully, I get the chance to watch that. Again, something important is coming. Next match on the card was Scott Hall versus Pretty Boy Doug Summers. Hall, of course, was seconded by Curt Hennig, which, as I just mentioned, Scott Hall and Curt Hennig were the AWA tag champs at this particular time. Hall was very intense in this match. This was in the first few years of his career, from what I've read. And I'm not sure if Scott was really good in his early years or if Summers just knows his part really well and kind of led the match. Maybe a little bit of both. But they ended up putting on a very intense match. Scott Hall got a lot of intense offense in for the first little while. Summers hit a gut shot and continued to work out over his gut. Till he got a front face lock in. Excuse me, I cannot talk today for some reason. A lot of back and forth. Another chin lock by Summers. Summers actually fish hooked Scott Hall's mouth at one point. That looked really painful. Scott Hall got pissed. Big flurry of offense. Hall hits a leg drop, back and forth. Hall hits a power slam for the win. He gets the pinfall at 8 minutes and 19 seconds. Next, we get a segment. Sorry, I lost myself in my notes for a minute. Next, we get a segment called In This Corner with Larry Zbyszko. Zbyszko played a Marty Jannetty highlights video, did kind of an interview back and forth thing with Jannetty, poked fun at the way he was dressed. They had some action figures laying on the table. I want those damn action figures, to be honest. And anyway, so we had the In This Corner segment, and, well, that was pretty much it. What I've kind of been poking at is, for whatever reason, it's not really explained why on the website. I couldn't really find a real reason. Maybe the footage is lost, but that was pretty much the end of it. Now, back to what I was talking about on WWE.com. So the original ESPN episode was 90 minutes long, but for whatever reason, if you watch this on Peacock, this version of the episode actually cuts off after the In This Corner segment. Now, again, did a little bit of research, obviously, looked it up on WWE.com. This is not something the Peacock has done. There's been a lot of controversy about them editing certain things out of WrestleManias and Raw segments and probably a bunch of stuff that I'm completely unaware of. After the In This Corner segment, there was supposed to be a match between Crusher Blackwell and Bruiser Brody, which was originally taped on February 1st, 1986. I would have loved to have seen that match. And then after that, there was supposed to be a main event between Blackwell and Boris Zukov. Really disappointed I didn't get to see either of those. I'm going to look up on maybe on the YouTube or various other streaming video websites. I'm going to see if I can find those last two matches. I'm sure in particular the Crusher Blackwell and Bruiser Brody match is definitely worth watching. I would love to give Peacock crap for this, but again, when this was originally on the WWE network before the Peacock deal merger, this has been an issue since then. I'm assuming it has something to do with lost footage. So I had mentioned earlier about the announcers plugging the AWA World Championship match between David Sammartino and Stan Hansen. This was actually plugged for happening the following TV episode, the following week. That match is not on Peacock. I'm kind of shooting from the hip here. I don't have it in my notes, but if I remember correctly, Peacock has one episode from what they're calling Season 2, and I think 8 episodes for Season 4. And there's nothing else up there for AWA Wrestling. So that really sucks for me. I actually really enjoyed this episode. I would love to get the chance to watch more of them in succession. I haven't decided. Next week I might continue watching AWA. I might watch some old WCW. I might watch some old ECW. We'll see. So, to get into the Ring of Honor stuff, Saturday, August 20th and 21st, we're getting the Glory by Dishonor shows. So, as it stands for Glory by Dishonor Night 1 and Night 2, the card for Night 1, we're getting a ROH Pure title match with Jonathan Gresham defending, obviously, the Pure Wrestling Championship against Rhett Titus. Gresham will be seconded by Jay Lethal, and Rhett Titus will be seconded by Tracy Williams. Also on Night 1, we're getting an 8-man tag team match. Violence Unlimited, Brody King, Tony Deppen, Chris Dickinson, and Homicide will face La Faction. Rush, Dragon Lee, Kenny King, and Besta del Ring. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. So, looking forward to that. Glory by Honor, Night 2. Jay and Mark Briscoe versus Flip Gordon and Demonic Flamita. Looking forward to seeing the Briscoes in action. Night 2, we will see Violence Unlimited, again, Brody King, Tony Deppen, Chris Dickinson, and Homicide versus The Foundation. Jay Lethal, John Gresham, Tracy Williams, and Rhett Titus. And then we will also get Bandito and Ray Horse versus Rush and Dragon Lee. And inside of a solid steel cage, we will get Matt Taven versus Vincent with Matt Taven's world title match on the line. Again, I'm a little confused about that. I'm only a little confused about that because supposedly Matt Taven is leaving. So, I mean, if he wins the match, does he still get his world title rematch before he leaves? I really don't know. No. We'll see what happens there. But as far as I feel like, hold on here a minute. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I feel like I'm missing something. Wasn't there? I'm pretty sure there was supposed to be a world championship match that sorry, ladies and gentlemen, be patient with me. Okay, you know what? I'm not gonna bore you. I'm pretty sure Bandito is supposed to be defending his championship. I believe it was on night one. I'll correct myself next week. I don't want to bore you with a bunch of silence. So, from that, we get on to ROH TV 514. We started out with a recap of the end of the Mandy Leon and Quinn McKay brass knucks situation, and then there was an interview with Mandy and Angelina. But on that note, I noticed earlier today, actually, that I saw a poll on YouTube that Ring of Honor has put up a poll that basically you get to vote whether you want Quinn in the tournament or not as a consequence to Mandy Leon using the brass knucks in this match. I did a little bit more searching on Twitter and found a video basically of a recording. Quinn McKay does her thing. Director yells cut, and then the First Lady of Wrestling, of course, walks up and basically tells her that she is going to be putting a poll up. I believe I saw it up on YouTube. The link I saw in Twitter had to do with a Facebook group. I voted on on YouTube. So, yeah, Maria Kanellis is giving her another chance. If you're a big Quinn McKay fan, like I am, I encourage you to vote. I already voted. I'd like to see her in the tournament. I don't know if she's going to win the whole thing. If she gets into it, we'll see. When I voted, I want to say the percentage of people that had voted for her to be in the tournament was somewhere around 80%. I'm not going to pull it up on my phone. I already got a bunch of silence and shit in this podcast. I don't want to bore you guys any further. So, after all the recap, first match on the card was the world famous Cheeseburger versus Flip Gordon. Oh, okay. Yeah. Here it is in my notes. During Flip's entrance, it was announced about his championship match. That's the match I forgot about. Flip Gordon versus Bandito, which I believe is for night one. Sorry that was out of order. My apologies. So, the announcers played up the fact that Cheeseburger was from the Pure Decision and might have trouble adjusting to the regular rules. The announcers seem to play this up every time someone from the Pure Division has a regular rules match, which I actually kind of think is cool. It adds a little more realism to the whole situation, in my opinion. Cheeseburger would spend most of the match working over actually both shoulders and arms at first on Flip Gordon. Flip Gordon would counter, and we saw a lot of high flying. Flip Gordon ended up posting himself, at which point Cheeseburger would work over what was the left arm. So when he posted himself with, spent the rest of the match basically working over the left arm. Flip Gordon would end up winning with an STF, step over crossface. All in all, thought it was a pretty good match. Definitely recommend it. Now, on to what I thought was the match of the night. PCO versus Sludge. Number one, Danhausen, awesome on commentary. In my opinion, Danhausen so far is wrestling comedy done right. Him joking around about PCO working out by lifting caskets. I just thought Danhausen was gold on commentary. I wish they would put him on commentary more. I actually believe there is an ROH TV episode from earlier in the year where Danhausen on commentary through the whole thing. I'll next week, if I remember, I will get the TV episode for you guys in case you haven't seen it, and you definitely need to go back and watch that. I love Danhausen. I don't expect that he'll be a world champion. I could see him maybe as a TV champion, or hopefully if this partnership with PCO goes well, maybe they'll end up with the world tag titles. But I would love to see it. I know the more traditional wrestling fans, some of them aren't really a big fan of him. Jim Cornette is, which is kind of surprising. Although I don't think he's actually seen any of his matches. I just think he's seen cameo videos and promos and that sort of thing. So, anyway, sorry, went off on a tangent there. Back to the match. PCO versus Sledge. There was plenty of hard-hitting action back and forth with this. This was a really good big man match. I highly recommend this. Again, definitely go watch this. This match actually kind of made me yearn for having crowds back full time, because I feel like this is a match that they would have really gotten into. I know that we're getting crowds at Glory by Honor, Night 1 and Night 2. I haven't seen any updates about when we may get crowds back full time. I can't imagine. They seem to be bringing crowds back for all their specials, pay-per-views, whatever the hell you want to call them at this point. They have a streaming service just like WWE, so I don't know if you can really call them pay-per-views. The only company, major company anyway, that's running traditional pay-per-views at this point is AEW. I think TNA, Impact Wrestling, whatever the hell you want to call them, they might still be running traditional pay-per-views. I don't know. Anyway, off on a tangent again. Sorry. Back to the match. The end of the match between PCO and Sludge would basically see these two battle back and forth out onto the floor. The ref was trying to gain control, and Sledge would throw the referee to the ground, causing him to have the bell rang. Sad to say, after that happened, I was kind of distracted by some things that were going on. Again, personal stuff. Not going to get into it. I assume that PCO would have won by disqualification. I don't know if it was actually announced that or not, or if, I guess, maybe the match was just thrown out. I don't know. The main event of the evening was Dan Castle and Eli Olsom versus Drake Dapper. I mentioned, it was either last week or the week before, that I'm not a big fan of triple threat matches. And this one was more of a traditional triple threat match. The one with Dragon Lee from a few weeks ago, I thought was really interesting, just because the way that one was set up. and him kind of picking his spots. And then with him, the idea of the match wasn't so much to win as it was to just not lose so he could get a championship match later. There was none of that here. This was more of a traditional triple threat match where all three of them would wrestle for a little while. Someone would get hit, roll out. The other two would fight for a little while, and so on and so forth. For a triple threat match, it wasn't bad. But again, triple threat matches I'm not terribly into. It was a little bit more basic. So the end of this match would actually see Draper and Castle would be on the outside arguing, and Castle would basically scream at Draper to get back in the ring and do something. And then when he got in, the Peacock Squad, which actually jump up on the apron, and as Draper was hitting his finisher on Eli, they kind of simulated doing the finisher. It was weird. It was interesting. After everything was over and Dayton Castle and the Peacock Squad would go back, Draper would actually show all some respect afterwards. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing where this goes. It should be really interesting. We will see. Just to throw a little bit more Ring of Honor news out there, I don't have the matches queued up in front of me, unfortunately. This coming weekend, this next ROH TV episode, which is ROH TV 515, I believe, the women's title tournament is starting. I believe all three matches that are taking place on ROH TV this week have to do with the women's title tournament. So I'm really looking forward to that. Again, I don't have the matches in front of me. I think I saw the announcement on Twitter earlier today. So really looking forward to that. I apologize if this episode seemed a little weird. I guess I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Kind of fighting a headache. So if I seem like I got a little lost or whatnot, that was probably why. Also, this is only my 7th episode, so I'm still kind of figuring this out. Still discovering my voice. Hopefully, you guys, whoever's listening, will continue to give me a chance. And of course, you can only hope to get better in this. I'm not planning on quitting this podcast anytime soon. So hopefully, as things go on, I'll find my voice and get better. Before I forget, as I have quite a few times, if you have any questions or comments about the show, what you might think I could do or don't do, maybe stop babbling, feel free to email me at falloutfromdishonor@yahoo.com. That's all I've got prepped for this week's episode. I thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next week, hopefully on time. Again, thank you for listening, everyone.